Hello, all. Let's talk about cutting geometry and why it's so relevant to combat, okay, and combat dynamics with weapons. Knives have certain principles of geometry, and all these different approaches to knife fighting that you see are divorced from reality when they do not consider these aspects, okay? Now, when you're really studying combat with a knife, you have to understand anatomy and physiology, first of all. You have to understand targeting very, very specifically. But it's very unpleasant for people because you're talking about how to take somebody apart with a knife, okay? The same principle upholds to when you're attacking with a knife in a multi-dimensional scenario, okay? Probably the least relevant knife skill you're going to face in a combat related scenario is a Mexican standoff where you're standing there with a knife and the other guy is, okay? When you have to use a knife to take somebody out, there's a lot of ambush tactics that have to be considered. There's targeting. There's the understanding of how you have to mentally be prepared and how important it is to be offensive minded, okay? All these things that you see, all these passing where somebody stays in the same general distance to the opponent, a lot of those things go right out the window if you understand the value of aggression, okay? And work from that. If you understand targeting, if you understand different strategies with a knife, like I am a believer in throwing the knife. I have very specific techniques for throwing the knife, okay? And I'm not talking about letting the knife spin or trying to set up a certain distance, okay? Because you need to understand all aspects of combat to understand how a knife is the most effective and how to protect yourself against a knife. Anyway, one of those aspects is the geometry of a knife. I'm going to show you perhaps my favorite combat knife. This is maybe a $10 knife on Amazon, okay? It's not a $500 knife, okay? It's not been forged by blacksmiths in the Himalayas. Why do I like this knife so much? Okay? First of all, it upholds most of the principles I look for in a knife where I want to have to be able to kill. Okay? I'm not worried about cutting vegetables with this. Okay? I would never use this knife for that. Okay? It's an insult, frankly. Look at the geometry of this knife. Okay? If you notice, when I hold this in this fashion, okay, and so I'm attacking into visceral targets through things like the ribs, okay, for example. When you plunge this, okay, into so deep or so, okay, maybe cutting into the kidney areas, because of this geometry, your tip will naturally pull the rest of the knife up here over to the left. Not because you're changing your angle of attack, but because of the shape of the blade, okay? I'll explain a little more clearly. This is a kitchen knife. When I pull this knife in, okay, without any curvature, if I do the same movement, okay, the point remains the same relationship to the back of the knife, okay? Which means if this is plunged in, there's going to be vacuum pressure exerted. And when I have to pull the knife out, it's either going to get stuck or I'm going to have to cut a hole into the area that I've just cut into. Whereas with this knife, okay, because of the geometry, the hole is already made on the cut, okay? As soon as this point goes in, Okay? I've created about an inch from here to here of distance in the cut from the point cutting through this area to the body of the knife. The knife will be able to come right out. An important detail, okay? Why do knives have certain geometries? These are kitchen knives. This is kind of an interesting one, but it's, alas, still basically a kitchen knife. Now, don't kid yourself. If you're ever in a problem, in a situation in your house, kitchen knives are there. Kitchen knives are extremely dangerous, okay? They're extremely well made to be able to use as a weapon. However, they have certain features which make them less of a weapon and more of a knife for the utility of the kitchen. And one of those has to do with the geometry, okay? The geometry of this is for chopping and cutting, okay? It's also, if I'm cutting into something, it assumes that I'm cutting it in an area where I have control. I'm processing something, okay? Here's a kukri, very different kind of a knife, right? But lo and behold, we have that same significant geometry. Not necessarily for a specific purpose, although you're lopping with this area and cutting with this area. But when you chop with this and you lop with this, I've said this in other videos before, what happens is, if you look at this, this whole blade is behind here, out here. That means that I don't have to try to cut you after I lop, okay? If I lop into an area with an artery, for example, okay? If I lop with this, I will get exactly pretty much around the area to some degree, the muscle I cut, but as I pull a knife out, I'm only penetrating a limited area because of the geometry. With this, once I lop here, as I start to cut, all this will cut through, okay? If I'm coming behind somebody and lopping their head, I'm not necessarily going to decapitate them. That's the movies. But what will happen is, as this lops, this will come through and sever, okay? That means that I don't have to try to cut arteries, okay? The geometry of the knife is such that when I'm attacking a target, lopping, and maybe in an ambush attack, just pulling the knife out with pressure will engage a deep cut to other areas on the body, okay? There are other solutions to this problem. There are more extreme solutions to this problem. If we look at the karambit, okay? This is a more extreme aspect of that because the karambit is a surface area weapon, okay? You're basically creating multiple cuts and stabs to vital areas, okay? But you'll notice because of this geometry, okay, you have both sides. It's a double edge, okay? You can pull through that way, okay? And because of this curvature and this angle, you can move the knife here and get a lot of distance through the area that you penetrated so that the knife doesn't get stuck. This is an excellent karambit. Again, it's very inexpensive. It's not an expensive one, but notice this, okay? This means if this gets stuck, okay, and this is why the type of cutting surface, okay, serrated is excellent under certain conditions for combat weapons. I can always pull this through, and this will simply tear apart the flesh, okay? So, for example, if I've done something where I'm here and I'm stuck, I push the knife in and I come through and cut with this, I will tear that off and through and be able to retain my weapon, okay? So don't ever knock serrated cutting surfaces, okay? So that is an example of a more extreme understanding of geometry where you create more curvature for a purpose. It's not the only solution, okay? Let's take a classical tanto. Again, maybe a $6, $7 tanto, okay? The solution with the tanto is a little different, okay? You have the secondary blade. That secondary blade allows you, okay, an additional cutting surface when you're cutting into and through an object. The tanto is designed for both applications. You see this type of tip on swords as well sometimes, okay, in various degrees. This is the most pronounced, okay? What this is it's a secondary cutting surface, okay? You can use this to cut across into the center line, up into the sublingual, up through the brachial and other artery areas, because the way the human body is designed, when you come up, you can catch vital areas, okay? We're not protected very well that way. We're protected going down, okay? This way, okay? My throat, my plexus, my groin, everything is protected, but coming up, not so much, okay? Whoosh, whoosh, okay? Whoosh, whoosh, okay? So that's another solution to that, is creating that secondary cutting surface when you want to do superficial cuts to areas, okay? Then you have the geometry of something that is designed exclusively to stab, okay? This is a weapon that is designed for one purpose and one purpose alone. This is not to butter your bread in the morning, okay? This is designed to stab, and ultimately you can break it off if you stab properly. If you take this weapon, okay, and you stab into this girdle here, where your collarbone is, okay, either from behind coming slightly forwards or from in front slightly back, you get to all these veins and arteries, okay, and you simply, by moving the weapon, will sever those, okay, as long as you cut in the right direction here. And a lot of times what somebody will do is simply break the knife off at the collarbone when it's inside, okay? That the reason this is effective is you're cutting them at such a distance where you cannot get to them to stop the bleeding, and you're bleeding out. You're also cutting them in a fashion where you're ripping into them, okay, using the collarbone as a sort of a lever, okay? So, again, different understanding of cutting geometry, that's for combat, okay? So when you see weapons designed and looking in different fashions, and you want to practice with them, you want to be very mindful of what the weapon is speaking to you about, okay? What is this weapon speaking to me about? What is this weapon? It's kind of a tanto, you know, but it's been modified. It's given more curvature, and this has been a little bit extended with the tip, okay? The best combat weapons, generally speaking, are single edge, because if you want to be able to use them properly, you have to be able to maneuver them, okay? And you want to have areas where you can brace them, okay? Etc. Keep in mind that any weapon, if you look at it properly and how it was wielded, there's a reason why it was designed that way. And you got to also be mindful when people are just kind of taking different aspects of a blade to make it look cool, okay? I never buy fancy knives that people do, okay? I like very discreetly done. This is a very basic design. It's a tanto. You couldn't get more basic than that, okay? This is a very basic kukuri of a mid-length, okay? This was well done, in my opinion, okay? The curve isn't too exaggerated, although this tip is a little bit absurd. This karambit, Very effectively done. You need that ring. That's your deployment. Okay? When you're pulling weapons like this out that are at a weird angle because of their curvature, a lot of times you want to pull down on them, on this ring, in order to secure them. Okay? This is a very nice touch. Very, very effectively done weapon. Okay? And this is so basic. Okay? It's got just enough curvature. Okay? To create that nice curve that you need in order to be able to move the weapon when you are penetrating. Okay? It's got just enough of a tip that you can stab effectively as you need to, and the weight and size is such that your dexterity, okay? It's very easy to handle this weapon quickly. Okay? With a weapon this size, you want to be very capable of moving the weapon fast. Okay? Switching hands when you need to, whatever the case may be. Okay? Just what it needs. No guard. Don't need a guard. Waste of time for a combat knife that you're using to really kill. Okay? Not in a dueling match. Okay? Don't want anything extra on this. Okay? And that's the way you want to think about your weapons. Anyway, I hope that was helpful.